So today I'm talking about Gnosticism and the astrological worldview. And the first thing to note is that these are very complex topics. Both Gnosticism and astrology in their own rights are quite complex, and there's all kinds of theories and books and philosophies, and so this is nowhere near full coverage of these topics, but there's just some kernels of idea sets that I think are worthy of exploring individually and then combining to see what kind of fruits we can produce for our practice, for our astrology practice. And I want to just kick this off by defining Gnosticism. This is from Oxford Languages, and the idea here is that the world was created and ruled by a lesser divinity called the demiurge. And often in the Gnostic text you see that the demiurge was created by an error by one of the gods in the higher realm, this god Sophia. And Sophia has this kind of error, this mistake, and produces this demiurge that then creates the world. And the other key part of the philosophy is that there's gnosis, or what you call esoteric knowledge, that can redeem the human spirit in spite of the human being incarnated into this kind of fake world, or this lesser world. And there's a sense that material existence is flawed or evil, according to many Gnostics. I want to juxtapose the Gnostic worldview with the Platonic one, where we have Plato in his Timaeus talking about God producing time in the heavens simultaneously and creating the 7 traditional planets as a kind of cosmic clock, which were essential and are essential to the operation of the time of this realm. And so the quote specifically here from Timaeus is that, this is the Jowett translation, the sun and moon and 5 other stars, which are called the planets, were created by him in order to distinguish and preserve the numbers of time. In Plato, that God is sort of offering a clock to humans, that we can tell time by looking at this clock and preserve the feature and quality of time. And if we go to Nag Hammadi, and I want to focus on the secret book of John, or the Apocryphon of John, I'm using the translation by Meyer from 2010, the HarperCollins book he edited of the Nag Hammadi scriptures. In this text, and here's a quote, by the way, Yaldabaoth is the name of that demiurge god in the Gnostic text. So here's the quote from the secret book of John, translated by Meyer. Yaldabaoth stationed 7 kings, one for each sphere of heaven, to reign over the 7 heavens, and he shared his fire with them. And so God is offering in Plato this clock to help us preserve time, whereas in the secret book of John, Yaldabaoth, in ignorance, creates the 7 planets to reign over the 7 heavens. You can see even that verb reign in describing the ignorance of Yaldabaoth. There is this kind of malevolent feature in the language. And so I'm trying to ask or explore, can this conceptual tension be resolved? How can we sort of understand a Gnostic notion of reality with a Platonic one, to sort of bring us into maybe an astrology of liberation, or a way that we can assist ourselves and our clients. That you can see the planets as reigning over, or kind of keeping rule over the 7 heavens, and we're here in the earth under those 7 spheres. So in that sense, are the planets prison guards? Are they here to trap us, or are they here to give us an advantage and help us preserve time and map out reality as it unfolds? And yeah, in the medieval world, and all the way back to Aristotle, there's this idea of 7 spheres. There's a lot of beautiful art that's been produced depicting those spheres. And this was a fundamental concept in the cosmology of the ancient world, all the way up until the Renaissance, early Renaissance and late medieval period, when you start getting a change in this idea of the Earth being enshrouded in 7 planetary spheres through folks like Galileo and Kepler and others, astrologers, by the way. But they did change how we view the Earth and the cosmology that we, raise up in terms of the collectively agreed upon cosmology. The next thing I want to describe here is Picatrix. Picatrix offers us a really nice summary of the ancient worldview, and here's a quote from the prologue, translated by Warnock and Greer. The second book speaks in general of the figures of heaven and the motion of the 8th sphere and their effects in this world. And that is kind of the key feature of this ancient worldview, that the 7 spheres have effects in this world, that the material forms incarnated here take on the quality of the planets in the seven spheres, and the idea is that when the soul incarnates, it descends through those seven spheres, and that the material form that enshrouds the soul is made up of the qualities of those spheres at the moment of inception. And so even the table, the computer, the tea I'm drinking, this has a feature of the planetary spheres. It's an expression of the form of the heavens. And so this is the worldview. It's key to understanding this cosmology, this older astrological cosmology. The Secret Book of John also speaks on this, and Meyer in his translation in a footnote talks about Sophia dwelling in the ninth sphere, which is the sphere above the fixed stars. And that, remember I said earlier, Sophia's mistake produced Yaldabaoth and in this realm, but then she's raised up to the sphere above the fixed stars, and it plays this role as an intermediary between the highest divine realms and then this earthly realm. And so she has this key redeeming role to play. And so I think a lot of the divine feminine spiritual practice, sometimes you might want to try thinking about Sophia as the entity that's representative of that divine feminine. The next text I want to point to this is a Gnostic text. It's in the Nag Hammadi, and the text is called the Marsalis. It's translated by John Douglas Turner. He published it in 2001. I believe it was a dissertation of his. But his translation and a lot of this dissertation are reproduced in the Marvin Meyer collection. And the Marsalis is really interesting because it kind of offers us a solution to this tension. In the Marsalis, the writer talks about knowledge of the soul coming about from studying the planets and the cosmic configurations. And he has this whole idea of the necessity of the human speaking and naming things and studying how the planets are configured, and that through this enactment or this performance of the study of the planetary spheres, we actually come to know the true nature of the soul. He talks about that receiving instruction, articulating stellar phenomenon, that both of those are requirements to facilitate knowledge of the higher realities. And it makes sense, doesn't it, in a way that in order to know something, you have to know what it's not and be able to analyze and delineate what it's not. And so through the practice of studying the planets and a horoscope and how those planetary energies are manifested in materiality, we can kind of distinguish between what's the soul, what's the planet, what things are fated, what things are not fated. You know, there's a mapping of the incarnated plane that only comes from studying language and the language of the planets and the zodiac. This is a quote I really like. He's saying in here that that the limitations set from them even before they were brought into being, that's what we can analyze and learn about when we study stellar phenomenon. It gives us knowledge of these limitations. And so like I was saying, that there's these kind of borders and boundaries that we can draw between the soul and the material. And so it actually is a necessary practice in order to quicken the spirit, astrology and studying astrology. And here's where I think Ptolemy can come in, because in Book 1, Chapter 3 of the Tetrabiblos, Ptolemy does say, he offers why astrology is important. He says it promotes good in the mind, it enables us to rejoice and delight in the world, and it acquaints us with divine and human things. And this is from the Ashman translation. And so this third idea that Ptolemy gives, that humans can be acquainted with divine and human things, I think here he's intimating and almost implying just what the Marsalis was talking about, which is that we can delineate these what is divine, what is human, what material form is comprised of, via the planetary spheres, and what is this kind of transcendent soul that's in each human, incarnated human. The Gnostics have this notion that there's a divine spark in each human being, that each of us has a shred of the highest divine realm. And so this shred of divinity comes from a plane even higher than the fixed stars, even higher than the ninth sphere of Sophia. It actually is from the highest realms, because we all have this kind of divine seed that's within us. And I think that understanding that, recognizing that, acknowledging that, will really help with the astrology. It's helped me. You know, if I see tough transits coming up, I think, well, yeah, this is just the dance or the play of the material forms, but there's this inherent divine essence that's higher or transcendent that can kind of move me beyond whatever this transit may be. And when I work with clients, it's also similarly powerful. If you guys have done yoga, you know that there's this idea of namaste, may the light in me see the light in you, or the higher soul in me see the higher soul than you. And I think that's helped me when I talk about astrology with people is like, let's get out of the way, all right? We're divine beings with this divine spark in us, and that's prima facie true. And then the astrology, yeah, let's go into it, but that can never take away from this essence, this divine essence. Advaita Vedanta has this same concept. This is a Hindu philosophy. In the Advaita Vedanta model, the phenomenal world is an illusion sounds like Gnosticism, doesn't it? And that what's important or what's essential is the idea of Atman, soul, Brahman, this kind of inherent transcendent divinity that each human being has. And that's the true identity of all human beings, is the Atman. And that this is a way to kind of move through or liberate the soul from this illusory material world. And so this is the conclusion I've reached through studying these different cosmologies from the ancient world, is that this divine essence is the transcendent essence, and that through the study of the planets and their configurations, we can appreciate the divine essence, understand its nature, and then work with the material forms as a way to kind of juxtapose or offset the temporary materiality with this greater transcendent divinity. Okay, cartomancy pull. This is the 8 of diamonds, the production card, and I think it's very fitting given the talk today because the sun is the organ of mental perception. It's the light seer of the sky. It's in our charts, it can represent the ego, the seeing and perceiving self. And in some sense, it could represent the Atman, or this kind of divine spark that's inherent in each one of us. And so when we bring that solar energy into the material parts of our lives, right, that everyday necessities and the everyday drudgery that we have to do to produce things, whether that's a job or simply going to the shower and grooming and trimming your hair and making food, and all of that mundane material requirement that we must undertake to function, bringing the solar mindset into that can kind of provide relief in the moment, right? I have this divine perceiver. I'm just perceiving myself working. Yeah, this is necessary because of the particular rules of this material incarnation. This idea in Zen Buddhism, right? Chop wood, carry water. That's how you are enlightened. And so I think that the production card here in the 8 of diamonds is really about enlightenment through that daily workload and seeing the beauty and the necessity of it. And it's almost like the soul needed a container, right? This material container. We're here in the material form. It has its own rules, but without it, the soul wouldn't have a place to inhabit, and therefore couldn't be contained and experienced. All right, as always, you can book a donation-based astrology reading with me, sjanderson144.com. I look forward to reading for you. This audio is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, other podcast players. You can just search my name, S.J. Anderson, find it there. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at sjanderson144.